Pretty much every video game series has what I've grown to refer to as the era. The first four or so Mega Man X's, Super Monkey Ball 1 and 2, Mario Party 5, 6, and 7. Unless there are some life-changing titles on the way, it's likely these groups of games will forever be known as the pinnacle of their respective series. But just because a franchise leaves its era or has many games before its era doesn't mean that every game outside of it will be bad. Using the Mario Party example, I still thought 8 was good, and the first 4 are good enough that plenty of people consider that to be its era. And Mario Party 9 and 10, bad example, but the point is that sometimes you can step outside of a game's era and still find some underrated gems that you just assumed kinda sucked. So what's so important about the era, and why is now the time to bring it up? Well, that's because today we'll be talking yet again about Crash Bandicoot. It's pretty much undisputed that the Spinning Orange Guy's era started with the first game and left the building after the original CTR. Although, within the last 3 years or so, we've gotten remakes of all of those games with, in my opinion, all of them being improved. So I guess you could say we're kind of in Crash's era right now. I digress. Most of us know the tragic fate of the Bandicoot. Once Naughty Dog was done with him, he was passed around like a goddamn basketball before being basically abandoned. In that time, as his poor face repeatedly slammed into the court, we got loads of games that are now being fondly remembered by a generation that grew up with them. But you know what games aren't being remembered? The Game Boy Advance games. Yep, Crash Bandicoot, 3D platforming pioneer Crash Bandicoot, had a brief stint as a 2D platformer. The games were even developed by Vicarious Visions, who have their hands in the franchise to this day, and sometimes it feels like everyone's forgotten. Pretty much the only time I've ever heard another human being talk about the huge adventure was when Mega Mix was added to CTR. And as for N-Tranced, I don't know if I've ever heard anyone talk about it, which is a shame because I remember really liking it. Perhaps I'm jumping the gun a little bit by saying that at the start of what's basically a review, but these games do not deserve to be forgotten, so I'm here to make sure that doesn't happen by checking out Crash Bandicoot 2, N-Tranced. Wait, 2? This is literally the 6th one. As these games so consistently have, our story begins with our villains, this time with Uka Uka venting to Crash 3's Dr. Nefarious Tropy about Cortex's failure in the huge adventure. In a twist I kind of appreciate, Cortex isn't around in this game basically at all, with the role of main villain instead being passed over to Entropy alongside a brand new addition, N-Trance. Don't get me wrong, I like Cortex, but Crash has such an awesome selection of villains that I'm happy to see another one take over for a change. It also helps that Tropy's plan is actually one of the coolest in the entire series, using his powers to teleport Crash, Coco, and Crunch to him, where N-Trance can hypnotize and brainwash them. Fortunately, Aku Aku is able to save Crash, and that means it's up to him to save the day yet again. What this also means, though, is that rather than fighting the same few bosses we see in every game, our hypnotized friends will be standing in the way. Such an awesome concept if you ask me, and this is why N-Trance is my favorite villain in the series. I remember playing Nitro Kart back in the day and being so confused as to why Polar, Purra, and Dingodile were on this gross Egg Boys team, only to play this game and realize that, holy crap, it's because he brainwashed them. Regardless, that's pretty much all there is to it. Through 24 levels spread across 5 connected worlds, you'll do what Crash always does. Spin through boxes, collect gems and crystals, and of course, f*** around with random vehicles. Wouldn't be a Crash game without them. For the most part, these levels are exactly as they are in the console games, aside from the fact that they only stick to the side-scrolling parts. Makes sense, the GBA is not really capable of 3D visuals. Oddly enough though, there are levels that have you moving towards or away from the screen, but they always stand alone. Which is also weird because if I recall, the huge adventure had you switching halfway through like you'd normally expect, running away from the star of 2002's hit game, There Is No God. I can't imagine why they would bother separating them for this one, unless I'm actually on the development team, because I kinda like it better this way. Mostly because I just don't think the 3D movement sections work well in 2D. The two that fit that description are the wakeboarding and outer space levels. The wakeboarding is your standard run away from certain death jam, this time trying to outrun this crazy ass shark. It can be kinda annoying to miss boxes because it's harder to see them coming than ever, but they're otherwise super easy stages, and the shark can even break boxes you miss if you know what you're doing. The space levels are pretty crappy though. There are only 2 of them in the entire game, and they are just so boring and go on forever. It kind of just feels like they wanted another vehicle for the back of the box. Or, I guess not. Too boring even for that, huh? Wait a minute. More than 40 levels? That's just a bold-faced lie. Even if you included all the boss fights, that's only 29. Oh, maybe they meant 40 after you linked to the huge adventure, but oh, and what do you know? The ability to get bonus levels that way was never even implemented into the game. I sincerely hope nobody was convinced to buy this game based on the back of the box because, damn, you did not get what you were promised. Back to what it does have, the geniuses who made this 2D game also brought back the Wrath of Cortex's Atmosphere stages. I don't get these people. In terms of gameplay, I like them more than the outer space ones, but for some reason they just loaded these things and made them painfully long. Look at this one, 112 boxes. Where in the game do you think this is? World 4? Maybe even 5? Nope, it's World 1. It's literally the first stage of its kind in the entire game. Why have you done this? Aside from that, the physics can be kinda wonky, but playing them is an overall fine, if tedious endeavor. And finally, we have the run and jump stages, also known as the reason we're here, and Crash controls beautifully in these levels. I honestly can't think of anything I'd really change about them. They're Crash Bandicoot on a handheld, all I ever wanted. In some ways, they're even better than the original games because the supercharged body slam and double jump were finally implemented into Crash's core moveset. God, I can't believe it took this long. Now please, do the same thing for the dash next time. Outside of that, I really only have one complaint. You see, crouch and slide are on the same button, which is normally fine because one works while you're standing still and the other one works when you're moving. The problem is that when you land, you'll always slide, even if you've not been holding the D-pad and have been standing there for a full second or two, which means you're screwed in situations like this. Eventually I learned to quickly turn around before crouching, which basically solved the problem, but it's weird enough that I thought I should at least mention it. And the final thing to mention for these stages is that Crash will occasionally hop into a vehicle section halfway through and continue to move right. The first is this magic carpet that continuously moves and allows you to shoot projectiles, and these are fine. It can be annoying how fast it moves if you're trying to get all the boxes, but in general, I don't really mind, and the same goes for the copter pack. It's much slower, but in general, I'd say I prefer it, since for the most part, you can explore the area at your own pace. But with that, we've exhausted what the levels have to offer. Just take them on one at a time on a Mario 3-esque world map where you have to beat a level to be able to pass it, and take on a boss after every 5 or so. The first up is Crunch, who flies around with a jetpack and only leaves himself open after accidentally crashing into nitro boxes. Just chase him on your carpet and shoot when he's weak to get the super slide, which sends you flying and is super useful when it comes to 100% completion, which we'll get to later. I'll just go grab a stress toy now. After that comes Coco, who rides around in an airship submarine thing, dropping bombs and shooting a laser straight down. After every pace or two back and forth, she leaves herself open, so that's your chance to take your copter pack up and get a spin in to bring her back to your side and unlock the rocket jump. It does what you think it does. So we got our friends back, and neither of our main villains are the third boss, so who the hell is it? As it turns out, back at the start of the game, they accidentally abducted everyone's favorite not Crash, Fake Crash, mistaking him for the real thing. I kinda love this, but it's still weird. For those who don't know, Fake Crash was a secret joke character included in Crash 3 and CTR, who is based off of a hilariously awful bootleg plushie that the dev team found funny. Thus, seeing him here, let alone as a boss, is simultaneously a cool callback and a strange decision. At least they tied it into the story, and his fight is fittingly strange as hell. He mimics your movements as you platform upwards, so all you have to do is make it so some of the obstacles barely clip him without hitting you. Your reward for this win is the returning Death Tornado Spin. Or just the tornado spin, I guess? They can show my boy getting cooked alive, but they can't say the word death, apparently. With all our brainwashed fools saved, there's nothing standing in the way of taking out the bad guys, and first up is N-Trance. The first phase of the fight is basically just a shameless ripoff of King K. Rool from Donkey Kong Country, making you avoid his jumps and swoop in for a hit when his hand gets stuck in the wall. After you take him out, though, he gains 5 more HP as his robotic body ditches the arms and legs and just starts flying. You'll have to maneuver through his blast of energy with a copter pack and knock him into the corner where Fake Crash can pull a lever to pour lava straight onto his head. Hell yeah, this is a team-up fight, baby, and it's pretty awesome that my favorite Crash villain takes 2 heroes to be taken down. Afraid of fighting alone, Entropy runs away into his portal, declaring that he'll be back, and Aku Aku requests that you collect all the gem shards to chase after him. Yes, our main villain just ran away scared, and one of the good guys commented, "Damn, if only we could track him down and murder him." So of course that's what I'm gonna do. In actuality, the gem shards don't take you directly to him, but instead unlock 3 more levels that you have to beat to be able to fight him, which are honestly some of the hardest levels in the game, although they still don't compare to Rock the Kasaba. That level. But once you beat them, Entropy's ready to throw down, and it's possibly the longest fight in Crash Bandicoot history. This man has 9 HP, and the fight entirely consists of jumping and ducking under his attacks, god damn it, I didn't want to slide, and platforming across gems to land a hit. Once he's defeated and captured, the gang all gets together to take a group picture, and Uka Uka swears off using underlings to do his bidding, saying that next time you'll face a real adversary, leaving the game with the end. For now. And I don't know what that means, because they never made another one of these games, and Sanity picks up right after Wrath of Cortex, so I guess this really was the end. Deep breaths. 100% completion. For those who don't know, I've officially made it my mission to 100% every single Crash game, and that obviously includes this one. And as always, 100%ing this game borders on making you hate the damn thing by the time you're done. In all honesty, it was not as difficult as getting the 102% on Crash 2. It took me less time to get all the required platinums in this game than it took me to get the required golds in that game. What I went through in this short amount of time is the problem. I've gone on record saying that I believe the time relics break the level design of Crash Bandicoot. And that doesn't even begin to describe N-Tranced. The very code of this game crumbles beneath the time relics. Ignore the physics making rushing through the atmosphere levels awful. Ignore the wakeboard and space levels making you just spam the shit out of the speed up button. That's just the tip of the iceberg. I'm talking the controls feeling like an entirely different, more sluggish game. I'm talking spots where your button inputs just go completely unnoticed if you're running. I'm talking sliding clean over gaps, floating on nothing. The game falls apart at the seams, man. Thankfully, I had a good time grabbing the rest of the completion percentage, but the relics, as usual, single-handedly prevent me from being able to say that you should 100% this game. Go for everything else? Sure, you don't need the relics to get the good ending, but if you're looking at this game hoping to have that maximum percentage save file to gawk at, you better be ready to put up with pure nonsense. Regardless, this is the fate I've chosen for myself, and I will continue to complete these games until the end of time. Or until, you know, I run out of games. So what else can I say about Crash Bandicoot 2 N-Tranced? I'd call it a fine starting point if you're looking to get into the Crash franchise, but as someone who's already in love with the series, it's got decent visuals for GBA, decently fun gimmick levels, and some decently fitting music that I've honestly already forgotten. And overall, that's pretty indicative of how I feel about this game in general. While I can definitely say I enjoyed it more than the average game, compared to the rest of Crash's catalog, I can't easily say it's more than just decent. At some point I'll have to go back to the huge adventure and see how it stacks up to that one, but for now I'm comfortable saying that, despite not living up to Crash's era, this game certainly doesn't deserve to be forgotten, and I hope more people will take the time to experience its highs and lows. I mean, how could you possibly enjoy the Crash franchise without knowing where the evil Eggman came from?